Today's date is December 8th, 1995. The survivor's name is Isaac Suna. Name at birth was Isaac Sina. The interviewer's name is Eli Epstein. The city is Queens, State, New York, country, USA. The language is English.
What is your name, please?
My name is Isaac Suna. Uh, Actually, in Poland, they called me Jacek Sina, but when I came to the United States, I changed my name because the whole family had taken the name Suna for various reasons.
Would you spell your name, Isaac Suna?
I-S-A-C-E. The last name is S-U-N-A.
And would you spell your previous name?
My previous name was Jacek, I-C-E-K, and the last name was C-Y-N-A, Sina.
And your date of birth?
January 3rd, 1930. I was born in Końskie, Poland.
And where is Końskie?
Końskie is not far from Radom, Skarżysk, Lodz. It was it was a small town, but it belonged actually, the main town was sometimes changed województwo, which is the same as the state of Lodz. Sometimes it was Radom, sometimes it was Skarżysk, changing various ways.
Tell me a little bit about the town.
Końskie, this town Końskie, was in Yiddish called Kinsk. And Kinsk was a very beautiful town in the sense it had about 60% of the population was Jewish. The villages around was Polish people. And most of the town people were, I would say today, what you call Hasidic, Orthodox, say to a certain extent 90 to 95%. There was a Bund, but it was a very small group. The majority of people were Orthodox, and I would assume that just before the war it was about around 8,000 Jewish population in Końskie.
How did you find the Jewish quality of life in Końskie?
To a certain extent, it's very difficult to say. For me, I was 9 years old when the war broke out, but it was vibrant. It was vibrant in the sense that you had various types of Stiblach, various types of Chadorim, schools for, you had every type of social institution. You had, from the point of view of a Chevre Kadisha, to the sense of extent, to all types of needs to fulfill for each social group, for the Jewish population, and also even for the Gentile population. They helped out many times the needs.
And your family in Końskie, could you describe that, please?
We were quite an extended family, in the sense, and very closely knit. It was a family mainly, which was, so to say, the grandparents were the most held in honor, in the sense they lived together. For example, my mother, Aliyah Sholom's two sisters and a brother lived in the same complex of apartments, and this way, so we're very close. That Shabbosim we spend in each other's homes at times, and especially with the grandparents. It was quite a few grandchildren, many, in other words, cousins of mine, grandchildren of my grandparents, and there was tremendous love and interaction between the families. My immediate family, we were 5 children, three three sisters older than I, and I assume when I was born it was a big hooray that I was the fourth child. And although I had a younger brother afterwards, he was a younger brother, 2 years younger than me, so we were a family of five children. We were very comfortable in the sense that it was, you had a maid and whatever necessary. The main thing is that parents were interested in giving us, continue to learn constantly, study, you don't worry about anything. Your job is to develop yourselves. And my sisters got very beautiful, both Jewish education and as far as Polish education.
Was the study emphasizing primarily Jewish, or was it both?
It was, to the girls, it was more for both, whereas for the boys, for myself, it was mainly Jewish studies and to learning, to become a Talmud Chacham.
And
That was the most important part.
where were you studying, in Cheder?
Most of it was Cheder, private teachers. And Cheder, from the age of 3, remember still at the age of 3, in 3 years and 2 months, you started Cheder. Although there were various other older boys than myself, but yet it was love to go to the Cheder at that point.
Can you think back to your first classes in the Cheder and first exercises you might have learned in Yiddish?
It's very difficult. No, I can't, but I remember certain scenes. Remember that my father and mother brought me the Cheder for the first day, and I remember that had a whole party with cookies and honey on it, and then it's up to you to learn. And every Shabbos, we were tested by, so to say, brought to the Rov in this town, or to the Rov to someone who was a Talmud Chacham, test my son, and this way we got encouragement to learn more, to prove your knowledge, to prove that you have grown. And that was, the warmth of the family was always behind it.
The family obviously was Orthodox. Could you describe a little bit what Erev Shabbos was like when you prepared for Shabbat and for Chagim?
It was always, we had servants, and the servants prepared for Shabbos, and we were coming home from Cheder early and enjoying as children, playing, and the excitement of Shabbos coming, as far as washing up and getting dressed in Shabbos clothes, special food, especially it was during the summertime, and looking forward to Shabbos. And the Shabbos table was definitely very much with happiness and joy, and the zmiras and the warmth from many times you spend it with the grandparents as a whole, and sometimes with when the families grow more, so there wasn't so much place. So we had our own since we were 7. Many times my cousins came over. Sometimes I went over to my cousins, to others, and to play. And Shabbos was a very beautiful day. To remember the Shabbos in the Stiebel, in the Radishitzer Stiebel. Remember, you can see it to what extent, especially in the summer times, that people in the afternoon got together, and the learning and enjoying the Suda, especially, and before the Shabbos, before Rosh Chodesh, Shabbos Shembrochem HaChodesh, there was something special in this Stiebel of the Radishitzer Stiebel. It was a nice feeling.
Was a Rebbe there at the Stiebel?
No, the Rebbe was not far from Koinske, from Kinsk. It was a small town called Radishitz. I still remember in 1936, when I was 6 years old, I don't know that in the winter time, it must have been around December, and in Poland, very cold, that they had writing a Sefer Torah in Radishitz. And my father, Shalom, took me along as a boy over there, and was quite an experience that for 3 days we're in Radishitz by the Rebbe. In fact, I can still see the picture the Rebbe gave me to drink l'chaim, and I made a bracha. So he told me, Yingele, chapnish, don't go so fast. Make the bracha nicely. And gave me the bracha. Yeah, this...
Was that the only time you went with your father to the Rebbe?
Yes, it was also in 1938, once I went with my father, Shalom, to the Rebbe, but it's not so much vivid to me as the first experience of 6 years old to be at the Rebbe. They were, at least, Radishitz was a very small town, little town, and at that time about 3,000 Hasidim came for the conclusion of the writing of the Sefer Torah. So it was quite something.
Describe for me, please, your own relationship with your father and your mother.
What's there to describe? There was always the tremendous love, respect. I always went to shul with my father, Shalom, still standing under the talus of Birchas Kohanim, that is, and he was interested in learning, although was busy as far as making a living, busy in business. But yet on Shabbos there was always learning with the children, and as many times he said to me, I want to learn from you what you have learned, teach me. But this was only a cover-up in order to bring out, to give confidence to the children, and give confidence especially from me and my brother, Olav Shalom, that he always said, no, I haven't learned the whole week, you teach me. Although he did learn during the week, but he said, you have to give me over what you have learned over the week.
And did you?
And then we did. Sometimes grudgingly, but we did. And then our reward was something sweet, and to go out to play with the boys. And this was a normal life. Always stress, normalcy of life, even though that still remember that at the age of 6, from 1936 till 1939, we could feel the anti-Semitism, the boycotts of the Jewish stores, the calling out Jew to Palestine, or to that effect, don't go buy from Jewish stores, trying to discourage, especially on the day of the marketplace when the people from the villages came. I remember seeing still, because on the summertime coming home from the Cheder, the stores were still open, and the feeling of anxiety, because there was the call of not to buy from Jewish stores.
And where was that coming from?
I would simply I think that the influence of the closer to 1939, in other words 37, 38, I think that Germany, the Nazis, the Nazis have influenced, or also Polish anti-Semitism started to flourish much greater.
Was this discussed at your home?
No. My parents always tried to shield the children. In fact, all through their time, parents, you don't worry, everything is good, don't worry about it, your job is to enjoy and to learn. And this was their main motto. And all through the time till the last minute, that was the trying to shield us. We should not know what's going on, not to feel the anxiety of it.
Did you go to any non-Jewish school while you were growing up?
It's interesting. Parents did not want to send us to non-Jewish schools. It was, but we had to go In other words, children had to go to a Polish school in order to get Polish education. I remember still that was one time for a few months that my parents thought maybe that we'll be able to combine to the cheder together with the Polish school, and I went to the regular public school for 4 months, and however I couldn't survive it over there in the sense they didn't tolerate any Jewish children. Always was making fun, poking fun, the teachers poking fun, and therefore my parents have extended themselves in order to get the private tutoring for the Polish, and we just took the exams. So we, myself and my brother, just took at the end of the year the exams of the Polish school, and this way you had the tutorial help at home and went to regular cheder. There was one time in Kinsk there was a cheder chorev established. In other words, a movement, the cheder chorev by the Gere Hasidim, and they already combined, they already introduced, they had their own teachers to teach Polish subjects, math and the language and other things. But I didn't go over there to school, so we had private tutors in order to take the exams at the end of each semester, the Polish exams.
Did you ever explain to your parents what was happening in the schools and what you described as poking fun?
I don't recall surely that came home crying and came home completely dejected and at times already also beaten up. And that's what forced them to feel that you cannot combine to go to regular public school, because the anti-Semitism was so great, and especially children that were constantly protected. Their clothes were different. My clothes was different than the regular clothes of the Polish population that was attending the public school. And there were a few Jewish boys there, girls, but however, my parents felt that it's too much pressure on myself and my brother, and they took us out from there and gave private schooling.
How were your clothes different?
First of all, we had payas. And even, I remember that it was a tremendous trauma. Before we went to the school, cut off the payas not to make it so long, in order to try to adjust. Also different wore caps, wore head covers. And in the class was very uncomfortable, because in the Polish class one had to take off the hats, and I felt very uncomfortable as a result of this.
Did your brother go with you at that time?
My brother went to a different class. I was in a higher class, but he was in the first grade, and I was in the third grade, because I had learned at home, and I was able to enter the third grade. However, both were very made uncomfortable, and therefore both were taken. The last was actually for half a year, and then 1938 till 1939 was another that I learned privately.
What effect did that period have on your parents' shop? You were speaking of boycotts before. Could you describe what that was?
I would assume we didn't feel it, the children didn't feel it, but overhearing, it had a tremendous effect. First of all, business went down, and were worried. They were worried, they didn't let us worry, but they worried, as you can see from the expression. But life, so there was a boycott for a while, but however they made a living, and they were happy with what they were making a living. One incident that comes to mind, very important to myself, that my father, Or Shalom, had sold one of the business. One of the business it was, he had a mill, and he sold it, and he had some money left, and he wanted to go to Eretz Yisrael, take the whole family, because he saw what's going on, to go to Israel. But at that time was the so to say, in Israel there was a tremendous disturbance in 1936. Speaking of Hebron, and therefore he went to the Rebbe and to ask him a question. So he said, "Look, wait a little while. The times are bad. You'll go." But meantime, he bought another business, and that what never came out to the fruition of this of moving to Eretz Yisrael. Who knows? Maybe they would have survived, all of them, would have moved in 1936.
What businesses was your father in? Sounds like he had a variety of different businesses.
There was a large mall, in the sense it was in the middle of the town. I can't describe it, but there was about, I would say, 100 stores, small stores, and each one had various types of goods. My father and mother had two stores there. One was of what's called yard goods, textiles, and the other one was with various kerchiefs. Polish people did not use so much coats, but rather they used, the ladies, the women, wore very warm shawls, which covered during the winter time. So these were the two stores. One was yard goods, and the other one was shawls. And my father had a separate business, he managed by himself, and that was leather tanning, which was Radom, was not far. So he had some kind of business with Radom in order to bring in leather from Radom to Kinsk, which he sold to the various stores of that carried leather.
As the period prior to the invasion of Poland got closer, were you able to sense a heightened anxiety?
There's definitely, especially in 1939, I was already 9 years old, could feel that the tension, although, again, I must stress that our parents tried as much as possible that we shouldn't feel it. However, we saw that what's going on in Czechoslovakia, in Germany, and now, with hindsight, I can see what they felt. I can see, although at that point, most probably I didn't realize, because the children didn't realize, but I can see, recalling the way that they felt and acted, the tension was there. But they felt they cannot do anything about it. And I assume life was normal as far as we children were concerned. But there was definitely a height of tension.
Were there any neighbors who left Koinska, who moved to anywhere?
I don't recall. I don't know.
Was there a Zionist movement that was recruiting anyone to Israel at that period?
There was the Mizrahi. I don't think it was so much Israel. There was, but we couldn't. I assume that couldn't move. Couldn't get any visas to go. I assume so. In fact, there was a Mintz family that I think one of the son-in-laws, they were very wealthy, and one of the son-in-laws did move in 1939, got some kind of as to go to Palestine at that time.
Was there any message that would come from the pulpit or anywhere else that Jews ought to be doing anything about their status?
I don't recall anything of that. I don't recall it.
Where were you, and what recollections do you have of the day or the moment when Poland was invaded?
Oh, that my parents took us, and the first thing was when it was invaded, the bombs started to fall that moved us out from the town, because the town was supposedly more dangerous, and all of us moved to the village and stayed in the village for 2-3 days, and in order, because hopefully the bombs will not fall over there, and the feeling of anxiety of war was imminent. And then when felt that the German army is coming closer, my father was separated because were afraid, so he tried to go to the Russian side, to Russia, but however he decided, he returned after 2-3 days by himself. He said, I cannot leave my family alone, and joined us in Kinsk back.
You remember the bombs falling in
Yes, I definitely can see them in front of me falling, and but it didn't damage too much the town as such, because it wasn't such important. But the only thing I think that they wanted to bring fear and fright into the hearts of the population, to demoralize, and they did a good job in demoralization of the population. What should I say? That right after the war, right after the Germans came in, you found there was completely the fear, the fright, and they went so to say, went to town. The first thing that what they did is burn down the Kinsker Shul, the synagogue.
Just before we get to that, let me just go back for a moment. When the bombs started to fall and the invasion of Poland began, you moved to the village, you said?
We went to a small village, and to stay with the Polish people that my parents knew, and also there are many from the town. They're not only my immediate family, it's also my uncle and aunt, and my cousins. All of us were by foot and by wagon. There was no transportation of automobile. So went to the next village, where tried to set up by a family of Poland that we paid, and got some bread and got some food for the kids. And this way until actually it took a few days till the German army came in. And once the German army came in, we went back to Kinsk, to our apartment, whereas my father wanted to escape, and then he returned to join us over there.
Thank you.
Okay.
An interview with Rabbi Isaac Suna. Today is December 8th, 1995, and we are beginning tape number 2. Could you describe to me what happened to your immediate family and your extended family as you returned back to Koinska after the German invasion?
My parents and the whole town, as everybody else, tried to bring back as much as possible normal life, meaning normal life that the families should start again functioning as a family, starting to send children to schools, not officially schools, but as much as possible to send children to teachers. And although we were not allowed to congregate, to have larger groups, yet my parents sent me to a teacher, to a rabbi, and the first even 3 weeks after the Germans came in, we had to go to study. And I still recall the rabbi. That what we learned, to a certain extent, in one sense, we learned things which are very to so to say, to enlighten, like Shir HaShirim. On the other hand, we learned Yirmiyahu. This was an enlightened Rebbe. He was a Rebbe in Cheder Chorev, and he taught Tanakh. So for the first time, as a boy of 9, 10, was exposed to learn Tanakh, Navi. Life in the ghetto, before the ghetto, started to become normal. In what sense normalcy? As much as possible, that the families stayed together, started to do business a little bit with the Polish villages as much as possible. True that the stores were completely robbed and emptied out by the truckloads. As soon as the German army came in, the whole marketplace was surrounded, and simply the doors broken open, and all the goods what were available in the stores were taken away. The only thing is that my father, Ova Sholem, and a sister of mine, before the war broke out, they decided they will take some yard goods and put it on the attic of the store. And this way, actually, some of the yard goods was saved, some of the textile was saved. So when a few weeks later, after the war, after Germany was there, so my father snuck into the store and went up to the attic and brought down a few pieces of yard goods. And this way, he sold some of it for food. So it started to barter for yard goods for food, and try to have food for the family. And started again, the Germans did not, in the beginning, try to encourage to bring back normalcy, especially the Polish population, for a while. And hopefully hope that life will resume to a certain extent as much as possible as normal.
Did you think it would? Did your parents think it would?
I didn't, so to say, cannot say that what I thought at that time. And my parents most probably tried as much as possible that we should not feel the pressure. Although everybody felt, I mean, as children, they could feel the tension in the house, could feel, but yet they said, "Oh, don't worry, it will be good. We have food, and God will help." And tremendous belief in, so to say, that things will get better. And things, to a certain extent, kept on improving, because they tried to organize the community, the Jewish community as such, and there was, again, business, a little bit small business doing, and I assume, and we had some money, my parents had some money. So the only thing is that actually, coming back to the beginning of the war, the 3 days after the war broke out, after the Germans came into Kinsk, so interesting, the first thing what they did is organize burning the synagogue, the main synagogue in Kinsk, which I think is an important fact. In fact, they had a German photographer take a picture of the Kinsk synagogue, Kinsk shul, the Alt shul. It was a very beautiful shul, and put children in front of it, took the picture of it, and 3 days later, they burned down the synagogue together and let the fire spread, and actually our house where we lived also burned down at this time. In the beginning, they didn't let any people to come to extinguish the fire, but when it burned down, fire to spread, they started to permit. And I still can remember the scenes that my father and sisters and other people tried to take things out from the apartment where we lived in order to bring it down. And there were also at that time the German army started to help in order to take things out and to put down the fire. still have this picture see in front of my eyes how a German soldier was carrying a clock that we had a wall standing clock, and he was taking it out, and he was walking away with it. So my father went over and said to him, "It's mine." So he said, "Here, you take it," and he threw it down and broke. That's the and as a result of this, we lost where our partner lived and moved into my grandparents' apartment, and they had moved in a small apartment because my grandparents had two large apartment houses, whereas they kept the family together. As soon as a daughter or son got married, they wanted to have them together. So the whole family stayed together over there. And speaking of, in 1940, meaning a year after the Germans came in, started again about Jews to bring the Jews from the surrounding villages, very small communities, to push them into the town to Kinsk. So there was a greater influx of Jews, and the Jews also who lived out of the main perimeter of, where the Jewish people lived, they forced them to go into main perimeter. So this started to form actually of the ghetto. And in 1940, the end of 1940, beginning of 1941, two ghettos were formed in Kinsk. Why two ghettos? Because actually the city was divided, was a main street, like here there's a main street, all over Main Street. And that was the main street, was in Polish called Trzeciego Maja, the 3rd of May. I don't know why. Never looked it up to see. But it divided Kinsk, so therefore two ghettos were formed. One, so to say, for north, and another one south. And the beginning there was no one could cross from one place to another place. Things became more difficult as far as food is concerned, more difficult. But yet one of the winters, in fact, 1940 was such a cold winter, and we didn't have enough. The children were growing, and they needed shoes. So my father went for a trip by foot. He had a connection in order to get it's called sheepskin and leather, and went to the shoemaker to make shoes for us. Yes, it was a tremendous Mesiras Nefesh. Not only my parents, but I think every parent, as much Mesiras Nefesh in order to keep the children fed and clothed, and as much as possible, even though we were more comfortable than others, but we tried to keep us warm, and hopefully it will finish. The ghetto life became more difficult because the population was swelling, and food became more scarce, for the simple reason that we couldn't come in contact with the Polish population, with the villages, and those that were brought in the villages, I assume, wanted greater prices, more for it. But yet, I myself, my father Loshon said, "You go to learn." And we went to a cheder, what mean we had a rabbi. Remember still seeing his face, being that he not allowed to have a beard. So he had a small beard, so he didn't want, it was very difficult to shave, so he used to take 2 coins and pluck out the hair. One picture I say to my students today, one of those days that I was learning, and we heard that there was a lot of noise, so we knew to break up, because there were 6 boys together and in the room, and all of a sudden we hear a shot. Looked outside, and one of the young men was killed by a Nazi. Why? Because he had with a shawl, scarf. He had covered his face. Supposedly he had a toothache, but it wasn't so. He had the beard on. He didn't want to shave. He thought it's not such a danger. So the Nazi wanted to show an example for a Jew who has a beard on what they're going to happen. As a young man, must have been 20, 21 years old. Was a ger chassid, one of the younger ger chassidim. Used to go into the shtibel there. That was one of the pictures that stands out.
Do you remember his name?
No, don't remember his name. Don't remember his name. But the face I see it's not like a camera. That mind is not a camera. I wish I could be able to recall it and have it, but I don't remember his name.
What other regulations did you have to be so aware of?
The regulations as far as moving in the ghetto, there were curfews. First, when the ghetto was formed, the curfew was much more stricter. Then the curfew in each section was a little bit ameliorated, said make the curfew later. But then they started to permit to cross from one ghetto to another ghetto, from one part of the town to other part of the town, which was divided by this main street, which Jews couldn't walk on this street. This street was only for Germans and Polish people, but the Jews were not allowed to go on this street. They could only cross the street. Remember that once coming home from Cheder, so wanted to, in order not to have to cross so much, try to walk for half a block, and then we saw some German patrol coming, so we ran away. So we never crossed the street, never walked on the street, because one actually felt his life in danger.
How did the Jewish life continue in these circumstances?
In spite of all this, Jewish life was vibrant. What I mean by Jewish life, the synagogues were full. The Shabbosim were as much as possible as Shabbos. The social life, in the sense, there were groups that functioned as Gemilas Chesed, that somebody was sick, to provide for as much as possible for the food that was necessary for the family, for the people. There was Chevre Kadisha. There was, remember in Dalat Tevis in 1941, my grandfather died, and in spite of all the bitter cold, there were people who came and went to the Beis HaKvaros. I must say that the Beis HaKvaros was completely destroyed in 1943, that buried, and there was a Kinske Gemeinde with so to say kapos, Jewish policemen, and true, there was also text for the Jewish for the Gemeinde. My father had to go 2 days to go to work 2 days a week to go to work for wherever they send him, for German barracks. I don't know exactly what he worked. He never told us what northern. We shouldn't be upset about it. Remember one day that he couldn't go. And then he had to make it up for another week to work 3 days because he was sick. Life, people got married in spite of it. I don't remember any bar mitzvah of my cousin, although that I had a cousin who was a bar mitzvah age, and I don't remember it. Some people got married and had children, and in fact my aunt, one of my mother's sisters, just gave birth in 1941. I remember it because The baby, who was a year and a half old, was with us in hiding in 1942. Don't remember too much of the ghetto life besides that in spite of it, before Pesach, remember after my father and grandfather died, he had some clothes, the longer yibitzes. So for that Pesach, my parents took his longer yibitzer and went to a tailor in order to make a little suit for me and another yibitzer for my brother to have a suit for before Pesach. Shouldn't feel, so to say, should be able to say Tischadish, even though it was from my grandfather's top coat, so to say.
Any weddings in your family?
Yeah. That's a story by itself. It's very difficult, but I must tell it. It was in 1942. We knew already that we heard, although my mother Shalom never believed it, we heard about the liquidation of various ghettos. And in fact, supposedly a cousin of mine had run away, came to Kinsk, and I remember seeing him, my mother had served him supper together with everybody else. At that time, she didn't let him talk about what's happening. But children went to sleep, and he told them that he ran away from Majdanek, that he killed one of the guards, somebody else, and they ran away from Majdanek and came to bring the message that the Jews that are being transported from the ghettos should know that they are not going to work, that they're going to crematoriums, they're being burned. My mother, Leah Shalom, I remember, did not permit him to sleep over. How can a Jew say he killed another person? I don't know if she didn't believe it, or she didn't want to believe there was such a thing, that there was liquidation and killing of the Jewish people and of mass murder. Mass murder, nobody could imagine that such a thing can happen. Anyway, that was, must be in May 1942. But they still continued the ghetto life. And at that point, my older sister was 19 years old. This 19-year-old girl, and she was very much in love with her second cousin, Shimon Greenberg, but who wants to make a wedding under the circumstances? And there was a question of them saving them. How would one save himself? People said that if you make somebody as a Jewish policeman, they have a best chance to survive. And not only him, but also his wife. So therefore, they decided they will get married. Made a wedding. I don't remember much of the wedding, but I remember that partitioned off in our apartment, one of the rooms, to give it to them. Remember that there were quite a few people at that time. In one sense, it was l'chaim. In another sense, already felt the crying. Remember, my mother, Shalom, cried. No wonder she cried. She was at that point very thin. She had lost a lot of weight, and but I'm sorry to say that this wedding was probably, it's blotted out from my memory completely, but part of it, the hope that they will be saved, and yet they were the first ones to go to the gas chambers in Treblinka. That shows you the promises of the German people. Germans said that a couple, policemen, so they bought, what did it mean? My father spent whatever they had, I assume, Okay, I remember that he said he had a special gold watch for each of the girls. What it mean that when they get married, they give the gold watch to the chosen as a chosen matana. So he said took this gold watch. It was not a mega, it was a tzima. Tzima. This was the name of the watch. Tzima. Why? Because our name was Tzina, so therefore I remember it was Tzima watch. And he gave it in order to buy a shield, a number, and a cap. And this way he became a policeman right after the wedding. That's on this situation. Hopefully, that he and my sister, Alaya Shalom, would be saved. And they were the first ones to go to the liquidation of the ghetto. They were the first ones to go into the train and into the cattle wagons.
What was your sister's name?
Was Razel. Razel. She was a beautiful rose. Was plucked away so young.
And why were they the first? What were the circumstances?
I didn't understand.
What were the circumstances that you said they were the first to?
They first, the simple reason that they knew there wasn't only that my father that bought shields for the couples, but there were Germans who wanted to get enriched. So they gave this idea. In other words, this was their plan. I assume so. I don't know about it, but it was their plan in order to get the wealth from the people, whatever they had left out. And this way, they had, let's say, another 150 couples with the families. So that they said, okay, you come and you line up. So that right away, the assess Jung took those 150, put them into the wagons.
And when was that?
That must have been in September, October of 1942. 1942.
Was that the beginning of the liquidation of the ghetto?
Yes. It was... One day we saw that all of a sudden that the town is surrounded by young stormtroopers. And the young stormtroopers didn't let anybody in or out. So we knew that the ghetto is now surrounded. But my parents and the whole family had prepared beforehand. They heard in May what's going on, so they prepared an attic that in case when we hear that the city is surrounded, that they will take their family and all the immediate families to hide. So as soon as we saw that the stormtroopers are surrounded, so that was the time to signal that those that knew about the attic went up to the attic. And in the attic there were, I don't know what the number 88 comes to my mind. And this was, I always have this in mind, about 88 nefashos. My grandmother, who must have been in the late 60s, to a baby of a year and a half. And on this attic, we were, in fact, this sister who was married also originally came up to the attic with us. And then her husband came to the attic and knocked and asked her to come down because they promised that the wives will also be saved. So this is what I was speaking about before. So we went into hiding with 88 people on this attic. It was cold already. And interesting is that in spite of the cold and the tension, the babies of a year and a half, we didn't hear a peep for almost 14 days. That the babies didn't make any sound. And meantime, we saw the day after when we went up to the attic, there was bull horns calling out that all the population should come to the marketplace. The Jewish population should come to the marketplace, that they are going to go take them to work and going to transport them to I don't know where to. And we saw that everybody took a little tackle and went to the marketplace. I remember looking out because the attic was not so proof that there was a hole that could look from the attic to the marketplace and to see, saw the gathering and saw the rounding up, so to say, actually with the dogs. Can still hear the barking of the dog. And saw the rounding up of the ghetto. And then they brought wagons, and and there was actually orders, piled the people on top of the order, brought the orders to the train and put them into the wagons. That was the first liquidation of Kinske ghetto. And we were still in the attic. And then it became quieted down, so to say. But however, they knew that people are hiding, meaning the Germans knew that people are hiding. So they kept on sending dogs all around and again calling out if anybody is hiding, that they have a chance to come out, and if they will come out, nothing is going to happen to them. If they give up. And so therefore we couldn't survive anyway to be there more than this day. So my father and another man went down from the attic and told them that here we are these 88 people, and we will give you everything what it is, and let us survive. So this is how we came down, and another little ghetto was formed, about 500 to 600 people in this little 3 houses that were pushed into these 3 houses in Kinsk. That was the...
Okay, we're going to end the second tape now, and we'll resume at that point on the third tape. This is tape number 3. We're interviewing Isaac Suna. Today's date, December 8th, 1995. My name is Eli Epstein. We left off on the last tape with your father having come out and brought the family down from the attic. The liquidation has taken place, and now a new ghetto has been formed. Could you describe that, please?
It is not, the ghetto actually was consisting of 3-4 apartment houses. And these 3-4 apartment houses were pushed in to a certain extent, 500 to 600 people. Among them were those 88 people who were hiding together with my family. And this ghetto was very rough. It's understood, was very difficult. Didn't stay too long in this ghetto. It was almost the winter time. But don't remember much of, remember that only that my mother, Alei Shalom, was heartbroken. The fact is that she realized that she lost her older sister, oldest daughter. She lost her oldest daughter. But at this point, about must be a few days in the ghetto. One of the days was again, the little ghetto was surrounded, and they came trucks, open trucks, and the Germans said that all able men should come out. And those would try to hide, like my father, but he was in the middle of the street, so he was caught and put on the wagon together with 3 uncles of mine. One Pinchas Verschlitzky, Pinchas Grubstein, and his brother. It's interesting, 2 brothers who married 2 sisters of my mother. Pinchas Grubstein, and I don't remember the other brother's name, my uncle's name. I'm sorry to say, sorry to should forget. But the 2 brothers had married, and these also, and other men, there were about, would say, about court from about 85 men. And my father, Olav Shalom, thought maybe they're going to work, and maybe he didn't want to be alone. And therefore, he told me at that point I should come to him. And I was at that point 12 years old, near 13, and I went, and he said that I'm 14 years old. I looked nicely developed, and I went with him and they brought us to Skalžisko.
Your father was on the truck when he called for you?
I don't remember, but he was already gathered. He was among the group. I was not yet on the truck, but the group was there standing to be put on the trucks, In other words, they called him, and he was with the group of men who were about to be put on the trucks, and they knew that they're going to go because they wanted only men. They didn't want any women, and they said that they're going to go to work, going to take them to work to Skalžisko. So my father, Shalom, that's what he told me, that to have one of the children with him, being that they didn't want any women along. So although they had women in Skalžisko, but at that point they didn't take any women. So he wanted to have one child, and most probably in his mind was that this way we'll go taken to work. Hopefully he with the child will be saved.
Do you remember saying goodbye to your mother for the last time?
Oh. My mother didn't look, just say go. You can see her tears in her eyes and crying. She wouldn't have let me go, but she thought that my father maybe is right. He will save a child, and that's actually how the name, how the family still continues, because I'm the only one that survived. That was, and I remember getting to Skalžisko. And
how did you get there?
By these, by the what you call this transport, the German trucks, open trucks, got there, although it was very cold, got over there, and were put into one large hall, which five layers of bunks, and that's where we were put. And then my father every time tried that I should be on his shift, and were put the shift to work. The first shift was the first time we worked for 8-hour shifts, so my father, Shalom, wanted we should be together, but interesting that we were separated. They forced us that although all of us were working the same work, that at the beginning we worked together, and then being that I was not able to keep up with the work so much, so that the head of the group said that I should work the night shift. Night shift is easier, so it was also more difficult, but he couldn't help it, so my father worked the day shift and I worked the night shift. And I remember that each time when we met, so to say, when I came back, it was, I had 4 hours to see my father, and right away went to sleep.
I just want to go back for a moment. Do you know the date when you left Koinska or arrived at?
It must have been in November of 1942. In November 1942. I'm not sure, but being of the situation, must have been November 1942.
Do you have any recollection of the immediate time you arrived at the work camp?
They just herded us, took names, wrote down names. I don't remember, but I remember that just being in that large, which was really originally must have been a tremendous warehouse, and that bunk beds were built 5 high, and they must have been in this warehouse, must have been at least 800 to 1,000 people, and each one had to recognize, to remember which part of the bunk I had the fifth, because I was young, so they told me I can climb up. And my father, Shalom, climbed with me in order to be together with me.
How many slept in one bunk?
Oh, and one layer was at least 8 people on one layer. But then must have been on the same five layers must have been at least over 80 people, but they were, so to say, sections, each section.
Did you get a number?
Yes, but we were not tattooed. We got the number, but however, we didn't get it on our clothes. We didn't have a number on our clothes. I mean, we had still the yellow star, the star that we wore in the ghettos, but we didn't have any numbers that I remember that sewn on our clothes, although we had a number of admitting. In other words, when they registered us, we got the number in Skaljisko, but otherwise I don't remember of having any number.
Do you remember that number?
No. I never remembered the number.
What kind of work were you doing?
We worked at Automatendreierei. In other words, it was actually for the war machine. It was part of an ammunition factory, and this ammunition factory was preparing parts for to be transported to Workzell. With Workzell, they poured the sulfur into these that served into bullets, into shells for anti-tanks and for various ammunition factories. So we were lucky ones. We worked on Work A, but those people who worked in Work C and used to come to Work A to take bath. In fact, one person that you know is Chemie Kleiman. Chemie Kleiman, he used to work in Work C, and maybe I have a picture of him in my mind that I saw him once coming to work to take, because they were yellow. From the sulfur that they used to pour, their skin became yellow and very few survived. So I have a picture of him coming to this work for this taking a bath. But this was, speaking of this, where you have this large warehouse, and I had a different shift than my father. I still see the scene in front of me. It must have been in late December and beginning of January of 1943. All of a sudden, I wake up lying on top of this bunk bed, and I don't see anybody else. Was wearing a nightshirt already. Still at that time, my father saw that still tried as much as possible to be a human being, not to sleep in the same clothes that we were wearing during the day. We had some brought along. So I come run outside and I see there's empty. So I run outside because I didn't know what to do. And all of a sudden there was a, that they called out everybody else, they said everybody out. Why? Because they felt that some people ran away. And at that point, there was a selection of the people who able bodies and non-able bodies. The non-able bodies were sent to work. I remember coming over that the head of the SS came over to me. Who is that? And I said, good. And there was a Jewish couple. He says, oh no, he's a good worker, because he wanted to take me to work, to send me away. And in 1966, I met this man. Imagine that, I met this man, Eisenberg. Eisenberg was the name. Eisenberg in my cousin's house. And we were invited together. How my hair stood up and saying, this man is responsible that I'm alive today. Yeah, there are many stories like this in one slide. So actually, it became a little better Skaljisko because they needed us. They didn't have maybe so many people to work already, so they built barracks. And from this warehouse, we were moved to a barrack by three uncles, my father, Oliver Sholem, and myself to the barrack. And it would be very worthwhile to remember there was once one barrack that was known that there was a Radomsker Rebbe there. And this Radomsker Rebbe, I don't know much because each one was busy working 12 hours, tired. But one day my father, Shalom, took me over there and said today is your bar mitzvah day. And there was a pair of film there, so try them out. And this is the first, maybe now, say that remember the Radomsker Rebbe and my bar mitzvah day in Skaržisk. Yeah, I have to go move on.
What happened?
Don't just told me to make the brachas, so put on tefillin, said Kriyat Shema, Shmona Esrei, and put away the tefillin because the tefillin were not allowed to have. They took everything, every Jewish thing away. In fact, it's interesting. So we knew that time was also that we wanted to escape from Skaržisk because my mother, Shalom, and the two sisters and brothers were moved from a different ghetto. From those that remained in Kinsk were moved to a ghetto, to Shidlovce. And in Shidlovce, they were there, so we thought, my father and my uncle and cousin thought of bringing the woman either to Skaržisk or we should run away from Skaržisk to Shidlovce in order to be the families together. We always felt together is the thing to be. And they were arranging with the Pole to go to Shidlovce and see what's going on. We paid him money. But then he came back and he said, it so happened the day before that Shidlovce was liquidated. So this was, I think, in January 13th of 1943. That this what I keep the yahrzeit of Vov Shvat for my mother, Sholem, and my sisters and brother. So we had to stay in Skaržisk. There's no more to go, not here nor there. And so life continued the same way, went to work, and remember one day maybe it's a better day, but at that point it came Rosh Hashanah of 1943. And I still remember as a child, I used to know the davening by heart, that we didn't have any machzorim. So my father said, no, Itche, let's write it down. Let's write down the davening. So he started to write down. In fact, when I was lying on what kept us alive, I would say to myself and my father, used to know Mishnayos by heart. So used to say Mishnayos by heart, and Mishnayos Rosh Hashanah, Sukkah, especially about the Yom Tovim. And that's how we wrote down the davening on Rosh Hashanah day still, and at work. So all of a sudden, somebody started to daven the Musaf Shmona Esrei from what we remembered by heart. There are many stories like these to say.
You actually made a minyan?
Yeah, at that time, it was they alternated. People used to work, and then alternated. So if somebody took off, I don't know, was probably let go of the machine, so they didn't watch. So he done Musaf at that point. Said Musaf.
And how many people were you?
I don't remember. It must have been where the place of work must have been at least 300 to 400 people working, and all of them were Jews except the supervisors, and was probably paid something to supervisor in order to let us to let the people say Shmona Esrei for Musaf Rosh Hashanah. Yeah. What should I say?
What happened towards the end of 1943?
1943, it still continued the same as work. and there was in the ghetto. I mean, in Skaržisk at the workplace, there were many incidents that I took sick, and my father, as much as saved me. Actually, I was supposed to be. Typhoid had broken out in 1943. Typhoid among the people because of whatever reason is the proximity of people living so much together. 500 in this warehouse, 800 or 1,000 people. Typhoid broke out, and I was in the infirmary. And in the infirmary, whoever had anything above 37 centigrade, not Fahrenheit, whatever we had, so was taken out. And at that point, they came wagon and take out all the sick people, most probably to liquidate. So my father heard that I was taken to the infirmary, so he came and told the nurse, gave us a piece of jewelry, I assume, and told the nurse, when it comes to put in the thermostat, thermometer, instead of putting it on the arm, to tell me to let Suna put it on the arm, to open the arm. So instead of registering 39, which is about 104, 103, it registered only 37.2, and that's how I was saved. And he nourished me back to health. There are many incidents, stories. So, but however, there was life working, and people tried to help each other as much as possible. The Polish context, some brought food because we still had our own clothes, and some people had sewn in to the garments some pieces of gold or pieces of jewelry, and that's how they got more food. And my uncle, one of my uncle was working a tailor, so he had, being that he was a tailor, he did some tailor work for Germans, so sometimes he got a little more food, so he gave us a little bit, especially his own child was not saved. Shimon Bishlitsky was not saved, and he didn't take him along. He was a year older than me, so he felt that I'm the only one that has, so he used to give me, especially a youngster, to give me some food. And that actually continued till 1944, to the middle of 1944, when the Russians heard the Russians are coming closer. And you know what the Germans did when the Russians came closer? The first commodity was only one thing, is that the Jewish workers. And so they started to move us. And don't remember much of the whole life in Skaržisk. Remember that people from the hometown as much as tried to help each other, my uncles. And in 1942, it must have been in August 1942, when the Russians started to come to Poland, invaded Poland. Germany was defeated in the Russian front, so they took the workers from, mainly Jewish workers, from Skaržisk and started to transport them. First they brought them to Częstochow, which was actually a transitional camp. And from Częstochow, various peoples, and we, meaning my uncles and my father and myself and many others, stuck together. Cousins Greenberg, which actually I lived with them after the war. That Shimon Greenberg's father, my brother-in-law, Olav Shalom, who was married to my sister, his father and three brothers were also together, and we were transported to Buchenwald. And this was 1944 in Buchenwald.
Do you know the date that you were transported?
Must have been at the end of August or beginning of September 1944. And in Buchenwald, interesting, put us again over there.
How were you transported there?
I think with the trucks. There's trucks from Częstochow. It was transported by trucks. German trucks.
Were you aware that the Russians were approaching?
We heard the Russians were approaching. In fact, some people from Skarzysk, instead of permitting them, had a chance to run away, and they ran away to the forest, to Poles, but not from our group, not the group that of our family, meaning my uncles and ourselves and the cousins. Some or other, they didn't stay behind Skarzysk, and they went with the transport from Skarzysk to Częstochow, and in Częstochow, some people ran away in Częstochow, meaning some people I know because they were Kinske, and I heard that they were not afterwards with us, and I asked, where are they? So some say that they ran away and hiding. In fact, one I know that survived, that I met after the war.
Who was that?
Trying to recall his name. Hanchinsky, Hillel Hanchinsky. He was 3 years older than I. In fact, I met him afterwards here in the United States. I met him, Hillel Hanchinsky, here. Yeah. And what should I say? That's what was from Częstochow we came to Buchenwald.
And into Buchenwald, you were still with your father and your uncles?
Yes. In Buchenwald was that's where we were taking all our clothes away, shaved, and put on the striped clothes as prisoners. And got the number in Buchenwald. What the number is, I don't remember. I don't remember the number. And Buchenwald, we were there for a week, 10 days. In fact, interesting. At that time, it seems Buchenwald was not anymore, was already a little bit under the control of Red Cross was there. And I think that there were Poles who were in Buchenwald, and being that they heard that their Landsman, the people from the hometown are there, they came and gave us food. And interesting, that same Paul, still see him, who gave us food. In 1945, when we came back to Poland, he was the one was the head of was a communist supposedly, and was the head of the community, and he was the first one to organize not to permit the Jews, not to make them comfortable to those that came back to Kinsk. Yeah, so in other words, under duress, they saw then your friends, but then that shows you what people can be in spite of this.
Do you remember his name?
No.
You said you were in Buchenwald for a week.
For a week to 10 days. I don't remember how long.
What happened at that point?
At that point, we were transported to a work camp, to Schlieben. And there, we again started work, and over there was working for the Panzerfaust. Again, for the army, ammunition against pour shells against motorized vehicles. That was the place. And there was again barracks, and the work. In fact, they wanted to separate me from my father, and I stood up to the head of the camp, to German. I said in German at that time, please let me stay here. I'm a good worker, and I would like to be together in the same shift. Don't separate me. Don't send me away. And he said, okay, you want to work. You want to stay here. That's how I was with my father.
You walked up to the commandant?
There was the... yes, it was... I cannot express it, but we were standing in a row in the morning that when we came, we were standing 5 in a row and all lined up and being lined up, so he saw me, it was small, it was shorter than the rest, so he wanted to take me away from there. And I said, please let me stay here. I would like to stay with my father. I don't mind to work. I work hard and work well. So actually in Schlieben, that was, I had my uncles there and one day there was a tremendous explosion in Schlieben, where my two uncles, the Grubsteins, where they worked, that was the explosion, and over there, and they were killed over there in this explosion. Supposedly it was sabotage or whatever it was at that time in the end of 1944. I lost those two uncles in 1944.
What were their names?
Pinchas and Pinchas Grubstein and his brother. I don't remember his name. Pinchas must have been, don't remember.
Okay, we're going to end this tape now and we'll resume on the
Okay.
fourth tape. Thank you. Number 4, we're interviewing Rabbi Isaac. My name is Eli Epstein. Today's date is December 8th, 1995. Could you please pick up on the sequence of developments from Schlieben? You're with your father and you've just had the explosion that had...
That I lost my two uncles. In Schlieben, at that point, was very rough days, meaning that as younger storms came and they wanted to try to rebuild the ammunition factory. And as a result of this, there was tremendous forced labor. For example, people like myself had to carry rails to build the railroad, to put the rails down. And we were not in the shape to do that type of work. Many people took very sick, and many people were killed, died as a result. There wasn't already enough food, provision for food, especially for this type of labor. And at that point also, my cousin, and who I actually saw and made a brocha mechaya mason, because I thought they didn't survive, because I saw him lying in the explosion that between the table and a roof, but he was survived, and therefore his father and two brothers went back to Buchenwald. Those people who were wounded and survived in Schlieben were moved to Buchenwald, and Buchenwald was supposedly a place where you got medical attention. My father, Olav Shalom, work that this was suffered greatly, and all of a sudden, because of the malnutrition, because of the hard work, developed water on the lung and water around the heart and the lung, I don't remember exactly, and was found that it's very difficult. Was sick and infirmary, and was advised, in fact, one scene, maybe not, one scene which is at that point had little food, had only one ration, and we had the ration, had it under his pillow for both of our rations. And I woke up in the middle of the night and I see him cutting a very thin slice of bread down from the ration of bread. And I say to him, "What are you doing?" He says to me, "Itche, I know you are my flesh and blood. I'm hungry, hungry." And we cried. Anyway, the advice was that he will, if he goes to Buchenwald, he has a chance to get medical attention. So he went, it was an infirmary, and I remember that he decided to go back to Buchenwald, and they took people who were sick back to Buchenwald. It was in February. Remember to this day that we separated. We were very, very wealthy. And I think I mentioned to you that our wealth consisted of cigarettes, 33 cigarettes. At that point, my father said, look, we have to divide. And he says, no, you take 17 cigarettes. And I said, no, you take the 17. Made a pshara, divided in half. That's, and he went back, and he went to Buchenwald. Remember the transport, the way we said goodbye. Yeah, what kind of goodbye? It said, we'll meet, Mi'at Hashem. We'll meet back in Kinsk. We'll meet the whole family together. And I stayed with my uncle, Pinchas Grubstein, the Greenberg, Yitzhak Greenberg, cousin. And I continued in Schlieben because they didn't let me go to Buchenwald, only the people who were sick. And so I continued to work. Finally, the factory was a little bit rebuilt, and we worked till the middle of March. Middle of March, again, we heard all of a sudden everybody has to get to the place of gathering place, that we are being transported. And that would be Schlieben. We were transported in the wagon, started the wagon to, didn't know where we go. Many times the wagon went, the transport went back and forth. But we were transported, and the last 2 days we were taken off the wagons. And many people died in the wagons. Don't remember any names, don't remember dates. But finally, after, must have been in the beginning of April, or the middle of April, we came to Theresienstadt. And Theresienstadt was already the Red Cross there, and actually we, as a youngster, they took me and put me in a youngster's block, a junior, young people's block. And this young people's block was already, they gave me clothes and gave me a little more warm food and tried to a little recuperate. And actually I did recuperate quite nicely within these 2 weeks in Theresienstadt. It's a story about the cigarettes, how I got a pair of film as a result of the cigarettes, but this maybe, it is a very moving story. The story is, and I tell this to my Talmidim, it was when we came to Theresienstadt, and I was very wealthy, I thought that I will barter the cigarettes for food. So somebody said, look, here is a man from, very outstanding man, a Czech man, and he is interested in cigarettes, and he has food, and he'll give you food. I came to him, and seeing the picture in front of me, and he says, let me see your cigarettes. Takes one cigarette, tastes not bad, but it doesn't taste so good. He took another one, took 4 cigarettes, and smoked them. Say, where's my food? You'll get it. Said, listen, he says, I know you are a religious boy. I have something for you instead of food. And he took out a pair of film and gave me the film. I remember crying like a baby. Who needs film? I'm hungry. That is the first pair of film. In fact, I took those film, and in transport, they disappeared from Theresienstadt, that I went back to Poland, tried to come back to Poland. And we were there, and remember this till this day, that one of those days in May, we saw that there was no more guards. And we heard the shooting, and we saw the Russians are coming. Broke out, being that I was already a little bit better, and saw that the Russians have actually had the whole German army as prisoners of war. We ran after them, but my uncle said, what do you want, Nikoma? What kind of Nikoma? I said, we have to do Nikoma, but I can't do Nikoma. I wasn't in the situation, in the strength, and we don't believe in Nikoma. The Rabbon Shalom should be noting them. And it was very vivid. In fact, there were two other youngsters with me and said we'll go into the homes of the SS in order to go into the homes of the SS. But took some clothing out from them, but couldn't do anything else. And the liberation, the Russian army came, and it's good they didn't feed us, because some other people whom they fed actually became very sick because of the diet that they gave them. They gave them very fat diet. But and I was together with my uncle and cousins, and my uncle decided that he wants to go back to Kinsk, and myself joined him, and for 2 weeks in transport from one train to another train, finally returned to Kinsk with the hope that was definitely sure that family will join together, will come together. And there was the Sheres HaPleita, the remnant, little remnant, got together. Some must have been about 50 people, 50, 45 people gathered together, and started to organize one of the apartments that those that remained to live together in order to wait for others to come back. This was, but you could feel the anti-Semitism. Anti-Semitism in Kinsk was great.
From the Poles?
From the Polish people. In fact, one of the cousin Greenberg, who came back a little later than us, organized an apartment, and we went away one night. We went to somebody else, and he came over there. They opened up his head. Hopefully, he's thinking of everybody. A Jew must be very wealthy and having riches. So they.
What do you mean they opened his head?
They actually, with a hammer. I don't know who, but yeah. And luckily that we came back right away. Came back half an hour later, and he was bleeding. But however, we saved him. This way, he was saved. In Kinsk, we didn't organize any community, Jewish community in Kinsk. But however, my uncle and my cousins wanted that I should get back the house, the apartment where we lived. Why? Because my father, Oliver Shalom, took his children down a week before the liquidation of the ghetto and showed us in the cellar that he buried money, he buried dollars, and he buried pieces of gold, and buried other pieces, showed us where. So they wanted to get back this apartment, being that I was the survivor, and we lived there with pretense. And that goes back, we did get it back, after finally get back the apartment. And I remember one night, we went down to the cellar and digging, and we dug and we found one bottle with dollar bills. In fact, I came back here to the United States with $1,100, which was very rich for a young fellow like myself coming with this type of money. But however, this is the only money that we found, and part of it I gave to my uncle, because and part of it to this cousin Greenberg, because his son was married to my sister and was promised a dowry, so part of it, that's how. But the same night, we heard the windows where we stayed were broken in Poland, and we ran out from this apartment, and we never came back, not to dig and not there. And that was, therefore, we moved out from this apartment and stuck, so to say, together in a courtyard with various apartments, which was actually only the Jewish people who came back stay there, and so one can protect another. And we saw that's not a place where to stay in Kinsk, so a cousin of mine went to lodge. And I later on, because of the various antisemitism, in fact, I was put in jail in Poland Why? They stopped the whole train because of me, a little Yitzhak Tzina. What is he doing? That he was a smuggler of some. Paul must have said that I have a lot of money. So what did they find with me? They found that 150 rubles that I had gotten. I don't know how. Maybe it was a Russian officer who ate with us, to whom we invited as a Jew to eat with us. So he saw Jews who survived, so he gave them. So they said, I am dealing in black market currencies because I had 150 rubles. And that time they put me in Tomashov Mazovietsk. They put me in jail. And the head of the Jewish community in Tomashov Mazovietsk came to the jail to take me out. So came somebody from the poll, must be a lawyer there, and said, sign this paper. If you sign this paper, you go out free. And that was already 1946. And meantime, I signed away that I didn't know what I was signing. That I was dealing in currencies. So therefore, they put me in jail, and only my cousin came and gave bailed me out. And as soon as they bailed me out, we ran away to the DP camp, to Germany, with the whole group, because it wasn't anymore. It was that time also the Kielce pogrom, that Jews were killed in Kielce, and therefore we saw that's no place in Poland. Planned with the Bricha, led us to Germany with the hope going to Palestine, going to Eretz Yisrael. And that time I came to a children's camp, came to Bad Reichenhall, and then to a children's camp in Prinan Kimsey, which I have many pictures from there. Pictures already start with the Jewish community, and there were a lot of Hungarian Jews there. And in Prinan Kimsey was a children's camp, a youth place, but I was also in Bad Reichenhall together with my cousin.
And you stayed there until what year?
I stayed there till year 1947, where I heard from an uncle of mine. He heard that one survived from Kinsk, because here in the United States there is a Kinsker Landsmannschaft, and my uncle wanted to know my father's brother, Suna. So he heard that there was a survivor, so he was interested and sent papers for me. So that's why I changed direction from going to Eretz Yisrael, but rather came here because I was always interested in family, and this was always the feeling, I wanted to be with family.
When did your Uncle Aaron come here?
Oh, he must have come here in 1928, 29. He was much older than my father, Oliver Shalom, and he came here. He must have come here in 1929, when there was the crash. It was difficult in Europe. It was difficult here too, but he came here in the early years of his, to escape, I think, the army over there, and also he couldn't live in Poland.
Did you ever know him in Poland?
No, I knew two brothers of my father, one Pinchas Tzina, and the other one Lieber Tzina. These two brothers, in fact, I have the picture where they were standing at the wedding, at my parents' wedding. That's the only picture that I have left from my family, whole family in Europe.
And where did your Uncle Aaron live?
He lived here in New York, the Bronx, on White Plains Road. In fact, they actually, when I came here, they became my real family, and shared everything, kept me warmth. But at that point, he said, look, you have to get an education. I was interested, although I was always interested going to work to make a living for myself, but yet at that point I went to yeshiva. There was a family, Wind, their friends, Dr. Wind, who was a teacher at the yeshiva, and yeshiva high school and yeshiva college. He told me that it's time, so I came to Yeshiva University, Yeshiva High School, and I registered over there. And since then, to a certain extent, since 1948, I'm connected with the yeshiva.
Mm-hmm. When did you get married?
We got married in 1958, September 4th, 1958. It was a story of love, and thank God, Adnei Vesem Shona together, and have 3 beautiful children, 12 grandchildren, hopefully Yad Shem come more, and part of it is all of them say the main thing is what I feel is that in my life, it is the life of the whole family continues. In spite of it, we don't know where the Ribono Shel Olam was. We have tanis to Ribono Shel Olam. But however, I feel that I continue. I continue in the same way that they continue. And actually Hitler did not succeed, because our children continue the same spirit as my parents, grandparents were, and therefore they continue to live. And Yad Hashem will continue in the same way, in, so to say, Beruach Yisrael Sova, in the spirit of what Klal Yisrael used to live in Poland. So true. I think that my parents continue to live. I named my children after them, and we have complaints to the Ribono Shel Olam. We don't know why. However, I believe in spite of everything, we have emunah in the Ribono Shel Olam, and say should show now on should be good things. It's time to be good things for Am Yisrael. We witnessed many great things. Witnessed the establishment of Eretz Yisrael, which is the greatest gift that I could see, that my grandparents and parents never dreamt of it, although they always yearning for it. And we have certain treasures that we have today. We have to be appreciative of what we have today.
Thank you very much. Rabbi Suna, could you please introduce your grandchildren, your wife, and your daughter-in-law?
Okay, I'll start first with my best chelek, and that's my wife, Odette Hadassah Esther Malka. She's real queen. And this is our daughter-in-law, Susan Chaya Sora. They are 3 beautiful children. In fact, our son Eliezer David, who has the name of my youngest brother, wanted to take off, and I told him maybe today work, and Yad Hashem we'll get better together. This is Gabriel, and that's Abigail, and that is Rafael, and that's now. It is your turn.
How many grandchildren do you have in total?
We have B'li Ein Hara 12, and Yad Hashem, who knows? Look forward to more. And this way, we show that, as you mentioned before, that the Hemshech Hadoros, and hopefully it will be Lo Yimushu Mepircho and Pizaracha and Pizera Zaracha Me'atavadoro.
Mrs. Suna? Would you, Mrs. Suna, what I'd like to ask you is, knowing that family was very important to your husband, and rebuilding the family was very important, I'd like to reflect a little bit on your family, your relationship, and the family that you've built up together.
Well, I can only say that in all these years I've learned a tremendous amount from my husband about how to love other people, how to be sharing and giving to others. It's not always been very easy as far as recognizing we didn't have an extended family, so it certainly is with great pleasure that we have so many children of our own now.
I guess it's not necessary. It's a happy occasion. It's not, you're speaking about our children, grandchildren, so it's not necessary.
Yeah, absolutely. Susan, you have a remarkable grandfather and father-in-law, excuse me. And tell me a little bit about your relationship, and you've married into this family?
Well, I have had the fortune of marrying into this family and of having my father-in-law also as a teacher for a brief while, the class in Vayikra, which I enjoyed very much. In fact, my husband wanted to propose to me, I found out one night, the night that my father-in-law gave the class, but he knew I wouldn't miss the class, so he had to postpone it. I have learned a lot from my in-laws, both. In a sense, I feel wanting to protect them and make sure nothing bad happens, knowing of the past. When my father-in-law was sick, and we were all very concerned, I was expecting this young man, and we decided that we hoped that everything would go well, and we really davened for that to happen. And we named our son Raphael, because thank God Hashem gave us a bracha and healed my father-in-law, and we're very thankful for that and wanted to show our appreciation.
That's very lovely. Gabrielle, Abigail, want to kiss Saba? Thank you all very much. Appreciate your being here.
Thank
Very
you,
lovely.
Eli.
Thank you.
Thank you. Picture is a picture of my parents' wedding day. I assume that they posed after the wedding, seated to my left is my mother, Alea Shalom, Esther Wislitzky, who married Hillel Suna, who is standing holding his hand on her shoulder. Next to my mother is seated my grandmother, whom I don't remember because she passed away just a year after I was born, and my grandfather, who after whom I am named. Next to my father is standing two of his younger brothers. One is Pinchas Tzina, who did not survive the war, and the other one next to him is Liebe Tzina, who survived the war in Russia, and he passed away not long ago in Canada.
And we are taping tape number 5 of our interview with Rabbi Isaac Suna. Today's date is December 8th, 1995.
This is the picture of the Kinske Shul. This was a shul that must have been built about 150 years before 1939. So in other words, it must have been from about the beginning of the 18th century. That picture was taken 3 days after the Germans came into the town of Koinske. It was actually taken by a German photographer. It seemed that they knew that they were going to burn it down, and they wanted to have a picture of what it was. They took 3 children, I don't remember their names. This German photographer took 3 children, in fact friends of mine, and lined them up in order to give it some kind of a feeling of people. And this picture was afterwards found by this German photographer, by one of the Kinske people, and sent it to me in 1952. This picture was actually taken in Germany, in Bad Reichenhall, where from all over the people who were saved from Kinsk gathered together on a Yiske Day, the Yiske Day which was established at Wolf Shvat. In this picture you have myself standing on top. You have my cousins, Greenberg cousins, and you have most of these are landslide. I mean, many of them are survivors and live in New York, and some of them moved to Eretz Yisrael. This is another picture from the time of the first Yiska. It was organized by the Kinska survivors, and mainly these are the men who organized the Yiska, and it says Yiska Hashem es Nishmas Hakadoshim from the city of Kinsk. This is the picture that from my arrival in April 30th, 1948, with the Marina Marlin, to that my uncle had brought me over. These are pictures of people who came through the Hayas. The Hayas was instrumental of helping to bring them over to join their families. And the middle is me, seemed the happy-go-lucky fellow, which I wasn't so happy-go-lucky at that time. But at least for posing for the external, it is a picture of myself and two other survivors who came with the ship Marina Marlin to join their families. I'm in the middle leaning on my suitcase, whereas to the left of me is Joseph Herschel, and to the right is Joseph Soroka. I did not know these people, although I came with another close friend from the same camp, from the same children's camp, with whom we are still very much in contact together. Ira Getz, the name Ira Getz, who came over together with me at the same time.
The names again are Joseph Soroka on the left, and on the right, Werner Herschel. Nope, I'll get the first name, George Herschel.
This is a picture, again, from the same newspaper, the New York Post, of April 30th, 1948, that was taken when my uncle came to take me home, so to say. And I'm kissing my uncle, Aaron Suna, who was a very, very warm person, and knew him, sorry to say, that he passed away only 4 years after I came to the United States. He was very much interested in the family, and he made every effort, although he was the poorest in the family, he made every effort to bring over the members of the family who survived the Holocaust. This is what you should say, this is our nachas. That's our joy, because we see in them the continuation not only of us, but also the continuation of all the previous generation who perished. Seated are the beautiful parents, our daughter Rochelle, together with her husband Carmen Osabel, and standing to the left, the young man who's going to have his bar mitzvah soon, Yoni Osabel. Seated in front of him are the two sisters. The youngest one to the left is Yael and Miriam. And to the right, seated on our daughter's lap, is Talia Michal. Standing in front of her is Eli Moshe Eliyahu. They are our nachas, together with the others which we will see. This is our family who decided to make Aliyah. They are now, the last few months since June, they are in Eretz Yisrael. They are now going to be Sabras. Standing is our son, Hillel Suna, together with his lovely wife, Rani, niece Silvermint, and with their 4 lovely children. The oldest to the left is Daniela Gila, and our son is holding Shmuel. Standing next to Shmuel is Zevi, and the most beautiful girl to the right is Atara Leah. That's, again, our nachas and joy of our mishpacha. That's, again, our youngest son, Eliezer David, we call him David, or Davidl, with his wife, Susan Nee Goldstein, and with their 3 beautiful young children. Susan is holding their daughter Abigail, and our son is holding their son Rafael, and next to him is standing Gabriel. That's our beautiful treasures that we have, and it's our joy in nachas. That's the most beautiful day in our life. That was Erev Pesach. Hopefully that the whole family was together in our home. Our children, grandchildren, and it was a beautiful, beautiful Pesach. Now, our middle son moved to Eretz Yisrael, and hopefully that every one of us will join with Mashiach Meher B'Yameinu. Amen.